Welcome everybody. Thanks. Welcome everybody to the Village of Sleepy Hollow Zoning Board of Appeals for Wednesday, March 15th, 2023. We have 5 items on the agenda, and we will begin with the continued public hearing for 46 Hudson Street, LLC. So welcome the applicant to come up and present.
The owner is just arriving, and he has the front drive with the presentation now.
Okay.
So we can either wait to go second, or if you wouldn't mind waiting 2 minutes, he's in the parking lot right now.
We can wait, but do you want to just talk us through while he's coming in about some of the
course.
changes? And we won't abridge the presentation.
Of course, yeah. Members of the board, Mr. Chair, thank you for hearing us today. The actual project hasn't changed substantially since the last meeting, but what we've really tried to do was take each of the 6 variances that we're seeking and break it down into the 5 characteristics that would either allow you to make a decision to either approve or disapprove the variance. The 5 variances that we're seeking, the 6 variances that we're seeking again are going to be for lot area, lot width, front yard, side yard combined, side yard on the north side of the building, and parking. And really what we're going to focus on is a zoning study that we really collected a lot of data on to allow us to make an informed decision and actually see the points for what they are.
Okay. Were there any changes to the dimension of the building or location since the last hearing?
There have been no changes to the shape or location of the building. We are still maintaining a 3-foot setback from the north side, and we're, sorry, Pam, would you mind plugging this in? Thank you. There have been no changes in the shape or the location of the building, but what we will prove today is that this is definitely in keeping with the nature of the street itself. And in fact, the building as it is now is smaller than the existing building. And what we really want to prove is that we're making the condition better in almost every single way that the building can be better, according to the 6 points that we're going to be addressing today. So let me just wait for the password. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the presentation?
Yeah.
We also have hard copies.
You do?
So
Yeah. Okay. We did a,
Success. They keep changing. Why is that on that one?
it's okay, I can do one screen, yeah. Let me just make it full screen. Okay, so the location of the project is on 46 Hudson Street, close to the river, and this is the building, and as you can see, it's severely run down, and was a real blight to the street. The existing street elevations show that there are 3 new buildings that have gone up relatively recently, 54 Hudson Street, 34, and the proposed project, which is going to be at 46. We'll be seeking 6 variances. Like I said previously, lot area, lot width, front yard, side yard combined, side yard north, as well as parking. And you can see what the variances we're seeking are, some of which we can't do anything about because it's an existing condition, and some which are a byproduct of the proposal. You know, one of the things that I really wanted to do in coming to this meeting is make sure that I educated myself on exactly what you're going to be grading us on for each of the variances that we're seeking. There was a really great document that Sean had pointed me to, which was issued by New York State, basically describing, you know, all the rules governing zoning board and what allows you to make a decision, an informed decision about each of the variances that we're going to be seeking. So some of the verbiage that jumped out at me was really about balancing the benefit to be realized by the applicant against the potential detriment to the health, safety, and general welfare of the neighborhood or community if the variances were to be granted. Now, this is a really important excerpt because we believe, and we're going to prove today, that in each case, each variance that we're going to be seeking is going to be an improvement to the condition of this street. And I say that with full sincerity and belief in the project itself. There's also the Village of Sleepy Hollow Comprehensive Redevelopment Plan that I reread. I read it originally back in 2019. But here it is addressing Hudson Street specifically 3 different times. And what it is addressing is that because many of the existing parcels are narrow, there is constraint for redevelopment, and without consolidating parcels for a larger project, projects aren't going to be feasible. So what is necessary is for the zoning board and for the Village of Sleepy Hollow to have a new vision and zoning that will help to encourage redevelopment. Since this time, the zoning's been changed, as you all know, from R4A to R5, which has effectively increased the height and allowed greater bulk and height requirements in that area. The recommendations that, that I have as an architect, working with developers, is this street, and what we're going to prove today again, is a transit-oriented hub, which is directly adjacent to the Tarrytown train station. There is higher density that has been springing up all around Hudson Street, and these zones require fundamentally less parking. Consolidating parcels is unrealistic, and I don't see, in any kind of scenario where developers are actually going to be able to buy lots and combine them so that they can build projects. That's just not a reality that developers are confronted with. Two parcels don't spring up simultaneously in order for them to be bought. It seems a little bit unrealistic. So really, it's going to be coming back to what the zoning board can do to encourage redevelopment on the street.
Let me ask you one question, sorry
Of
to
course.
interrupt. Did the Village of Sleepy Hollow, when they redid the zoning, change the combined side yard setback requirements?
I do not know the answer to that.
All
I
right,
do not know.
go ahead, thanks.
So therefore, the way to encourage redevelopment is by granting variances, because without variances, development on Hudson Street can't happen. It's just a fact. The biggest point that we had at the last meeting, which we're going to address today, is about alleviating parking pressure. And parking pressure, as we're going to prove, is not happening through the occupants of the street. The parking pressure that we're seeing is because people park on Hudson Street so that they can access the train. And so it's come to my attention that this has been something that the city council has actually been talking about for many years, about permitting, making it permit parking on the street so that people have enough parking and that it's dedicated to the occupants of Hudson Street. And I know that's not within the purview of this meeting, but it is something that's happening that has been identified as an issue, and I think that the city council is trying to address it somehow. So when we look at the target area that we looked at for the zoning study, it's the area that's highlighted in color. We didn't look at any of the RF zone because it's just fundamentally a different type of zoning than the rest of the lower Sleepy Hollow, but we're looking at the R5 zone and the C2 zone. And so really what we're trying to highlight here is that 42%, or the majority of the homes in this area, are 2 to 3 family.
Do you have the data, which is how much is 2 and how much is 3?
So this data was pulled directly from land use maps provided by Village of Sleepy Hollow. There is no data on what's 2 and what's 3. I would have to do like a building by building analysis, which I just don't have the data for. Yeah, so I'm using data that's provided by Village of Sleepy Hollow. But yes, that was the first thing I asked when I was looking at the data. The other thing that I really wanted to look at was, because 46 Hudson is going to have 3 stalls, what percentage of this area actually has 3 or greater stalls of parking available? And you can see that there's a very small percentage of lots in this area that actually have 3 or more stalls. So we're actually getting into a very small minority that even provides this amount of parking.
Do you know how many of the red homes have 4?
Yes, so I do have the data for that. So it's going to be coming.
Okay.
Forthcoming, yeah. So also, just to drill down into similar lots in this area, we were looking at lots that are less than 4,000 square feet, which is really undersized lots, and also undersized lots that are 2 and 3 family. And so when we're looking at lots that are less than 4,000 square feet, there are only 6 lots in the target area that have 3 or more parking spots. There are only 3 lots in that area that have, 6 lots in the area that have 3 parking spots. When we're looking at lots that are less than 4,000 square feet and also fall into this 2 to 3 family zone, there are only 3 lots. So So 46 Hudson is going to be one of 3 lots that are undersized and 2 and 3 family that is going to be providing parking of 3 cars. When we're looking at number of parking stalls for lots less than 4,000 square feet, this was the data point that you were asking for. There are almost 80 lots, and it's hard to see from here, and I don't remember offhand. I think it's 76 lots that are not providing parking at all. There are 6 lots that are providing 3 parking spaces, and you can see the number kind of diminishes as you get to more and more parking spaces. So to begin to address each of the points here. So based on the lot area, what I really tried to do was just take each of the variances and then address each of the factors. Now, self-created difficulty is not going to be able to be achieved positively for any of them. And I think, when you look at development, it's just kind of the nature of development. You go, you see a lot, you're trying to improve it, you know that you're going to need to get variances granted, but within a range of, reasonableness and possibility. So, the variance for the lot area, it's not a substantial variance. There are no alternatives, and undesirable change in the neighborhood. All of the lots on 46 Hudson are undersized. And you can see these are just some images just to try to convey that message. Now, this may or may not be the best place to show this image, but really what we're trying to show here is that the proposed building is smaller, has less bedrooms and more parking than the building that currently exists. And you can see that it's also increasing the setbacks from the neighboring buildings, providing more light and air, and is just generally a better proposal than what is currently there. As far as lot widths go, all the lots are, undersized. There are no alternatives to the variance. And the impact on the environment, again, we're improving the condition by increasing our setbacks compared to the previous building. And you can see here, a lot of the buildings on 46 Hudson have almost 0 lot line. Front and side yards. Again, all the lots on Hudson Street are non-conforming when it comes to setbacks. As far as the alternative to a variance, the proposed building width is already at a minimum and would become thinner than any of the buildings that currently exist on Hudson Street. So it's impossible to shrink the building anymore and increase the width from a 3-foot setback to a 5-foot setback because it just becomes an untenable floor plate.
So, I just want to ask a question.
Of course.
You're stating some of these things as fact.
Yeah.
But really your interpretation.
Agreed.
Things aren't impossible, things are tenable, it's just your interpretation as you're presenting it is that they could be done. It's just in the way that you analyzed it, it's not of value to do them. Is that fair?
So anything is possible. It's just whether or not it would be reasonable. And if
Well, again, that's opinion. Reasonable is, I just want to be careful here.
Of course.
This
Of
is
course.
an excellent presentation and very detailed, but
Yeah.
I just am struggling to sit through it and hear things that are being stated as fact as opposed to you're presenting.
I will not say things
No,
are
it's just,
factual.
I just want to
I'll
clarify
change.
the way I'm hearing it, if
Yeah.
that wasn't accurate. I'm just trying to process what you're saying.
Of course. So, as far as building width is concerned, that is one of the first things that developers and architects look at, just to make sure that a building footprint can actually work on site. If we were to go to a 5-foot setback, the building width becomes something like 18 feet, and that's just something that a developer would walk away from. So when I say something is factual, I know that to be as close to fact as possible.
So just to be clear, what setback are you proposing for the north side and what setback are you proposing for the south?
On the north side, we're proposing a 3-foot setback. which, and the reason that we chose 3 feet is because we are going to be able to have windows, light and air on the north side, and we don't have to fireproof, that side of the building. On the south side, it's 10 feet.
So that's different. Maybe I have a really bad recollection, but I thought you were proposing a shorter north side setback at the last meeting, and now you're proposing.
So I don't remember. There was a period in time where we had a 2'7" setback, and we
Right.
changed it to 3.
Okay, so that's important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's important to call out.
Yeah.
was changed.
Yes. So I just don't remember if it was,
It
there
was
have been so many
It was
meetings.
2 feet 7 inches. Yeah.
I apologize. So that change happened since the last meeting. And that works in our favor, I guess, but I forgot that.
Did the width of the building change?
The width of the building decreased by 5 inches.
So you didn't push it further south?
No, we didn't. We shrunk the building by 5 inches. Yeah, so it got 5 inches narrower. Yeah. Just to kind of point out the existing front and side yard condition of the existing building, as well as the building to the north, you can see that for 48 Hudson, there's 0 lot line. Literally, the building is on the lot line. And for the south side of 46 Hudson, we're 1.5 feet to 2.2 feet, because the building is askew. And it has like a little jog in the back. It's kind of a silly diagram, but really all we're trying to show here is that all of the buildings on Hudson Street are abutting the street front and are either directly on the property line or set back minimally, and the average is about 5 feet. Again, this is to show what a 5-foot setback would look like. And as you can see, this would push the stair into the floor plate and just make it almost impossible to get up to the second floor. Again, anything is possible, but it would make it very difficult to. Okay, so let's look at parking. When we're looking at parking, again, what I want to point out is the existing condition versus the proposed condition. The existing condition has 1 stall. The proposed is going to provide 3 stalls of parking. The existing bedrooms, by which we can calculate how many parking spots are required, is decreasing from 7 to 6. So we have less bedrooms than in the previous home.
And how many bedrooms did you propose at the last meeting?
So again, I don't know if this was at planning or it was at the last meeting, but we reduced the bedrooms from 7 to 6.
So I think it was 7 at the last meeting.
I do too, yeah.
Okay, so that's what it was, and we reduced it to 6.
And I think you also increased by 1 parking space, because I believe they talk about 2 parking spaces at one time.
No, it was, the proposed variance at the last meeting was for 3 additional spots.
By decreasing from 7 to 6, we require less of a variance because we would need 7 parking spaces instead of 6. So that was also something that improved since the last meeting. So we've decreased that just to make the calculus work a little bit better. And so as far as an undesirable change in the neighborhood, we've increased parking and we've decreased bedroom count. As far as an alternative to a variance, the only way to do this is by decreasing the unit count and decreasing the bedroom count. But again, what I want to point out is the Village of Sleepy Hollow Comprehensive Plan, which wants to encourage development on this street specifically. And no developer in their right mind is not going to seek that extra unit, or have 2-bedroom units, which is really what is the most desirable thing for development in this area. Substantiability, 50%. We have 50% of the required stall count. So really based on interpretation, if we're looking at the neighborhood itself, it's not substantial at all. If you're looking at 50%, yes, you can interpret that as being substantial, but based on the target area, we are actually on the high end of parking. And the impact on environment is that we're improving traffic circulation. So it's a net benefit to the area that we're going to be building this and providing more parking.
And conceivably, you could have a two-family instead of a three-family, but you would have the sufficient parking for the two-family because only one spot per family would be required, right?
Yes,
But you could put in 8 bedrooms.
could put in 8 bedrooms in we could put in a lot more bedrooms in 2-unit, and if it's a two-family, way more. And really what we're trying to do here is we're targeting transit-oriented, families that are gonna move here with their kids, possibly not even have a car and be able to commute into the city, right? Like that is the target audience for this development. As far as what
Can
is
you stay
required-
on parking just for a minute?
Yeah, of course.
So one of the problems that's happening at Edge is that the owners of those units are requiring tenants to pay an additional fee to park their car in the garage.
Mhm.
And the tenants are thumbing their nose at that and, sometimes looking for spots in and around the village.
Yeah.
One thing we were thinking about, or at least I was, is would you agree, or would your owner agree not to charge an additional fee to tenants to park in one of the 3 spots that you're providing? So you would delegate 1 spot per unit.
Mhm.
There would be no additional fee for the parking spot, and each unit would have access to that spot.
So I don't want to speak for the owner,
I understand.
but he's here, and I think the idea is that they're dedicated to each unit. But Alex, do you want to just chime in here?
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm the owner. In response to that, sentiment, I can understand that you want to be able to provide the parking that's needed for your own tenants and make sure it's not a burden on the neighborhood. So in light of that, if that makes a difference and that's somehow written or substantiated as part of the ZBA agreement or approval, we could be open to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I won't add to that. But yes, I think the idea is that you have a dedicated parking spot per unit, and typically, I don't know how Edge on Hudson operates at all, but for these smaller developments, it's typically not an extra charge for the tenant. So really, I don't want to stay too long on this page, but really what we're trying to show here is that it's kind of split evenly between lots that are providing enough parking and lots that are not. And so you can see that a lot of the reds are popping up when you have the 2-3 families that are 3 units. So like 28 and 30, Hudson requires 6 and provides 0. Some of the other 2-3 families also have 0 parking. And of course 46 Hudson, which requires 6, but is proposing 3. And the others that are highlighted in green either have adequate or more parking than is required. But really, all I'm trying to point out here is that it's a 50-50 split on the street. So there are a lot of numbers here, and I don't want to go through each of them, but really what I'm trying to prove here is what the zoning requirement is for all of the lots on, all of the R5 lots on Hudson Street. So how much is required by the zoning code and how much is provided. And the result of this analysis is that there are 40 stalls on Hudson Street that are required. The available stalls on Hudson Street are currently 23, But once you add municipal and street parking, there are 60 spots that can be available for parking on Hudson Street. And I think if there was a way that the village can provide permitting for the parking on Hudson, it would pretty much alleviate all of the parking problems that Hudson Street is experiencing. So, you know, what is not as clear is why there is a parking problem on Hudson Street. And I'm just hypothesizing, this isn't written anywhere, but I believe that it is for the transit-oriented, you know, neighbors, either from Sleepy Hollow or elsewhere, that are coming to Hudson Street to park so that they can use the train.
And what's the requirement right now to park on Hudson Street? Is
There's no requirements.
none?
None. If you want, and it's not even for the municipal lot, which would make the most sense. Like at the very minimum, you permit the municipal lot only for the residents of Hudson Street. So that would bring your parking total up to 51 of, you know, and you're getting much closer to 60. And that's taking into account the lots that require 6 that would never be able to have, like 28 and 30 Hudson. They're never going to be able to park 6 cars there, but it would create 6 more, you know, parking spaces per each lot. So I kind of feel like I'm belaboring the point at this point, but again, this is just a full breakdown of each lot on Hudson Street and how much parking it has. So you can see that when we get into the purple, those are all in the RF zone, so they're not in the R5 zone. And they do provide a lot of parking, but when you look at, you know, those buildings specifically, when you look at those buildings specifically, they're multi-unit, you know, buildings, and of course they're going to have more parking. And again, this is just looking at it by land use. So 46 Hudson is just, it's 2 to 3 family homes on Hudson Street that are going to be providing any parking. And this is just showing the amount of street parking versus private parking. You know, again, looking at the actual neighborhood and just comparing it to what we're proposing, what we're trying to prove here is just we're in keeping with the character of the target area that we're examining. So 28 and 30 Hudson, again, they're 2 3-family homes providing 0 parking. 12 and 16 Hudson Street, 2 3-families are providing 1 parking. Sorry, this is a mistake. It's not Hudson Street, it's Cedar Street. Apologies. I should have caught that. Each providing 1 parking spot. 8 to 10 Clinton, 10 fam and 2 fam providing 0 parking. 28 and 30 Clinton Street, a 3 fam and a 2 fam, neither providing parking. Sorry, this is not Hudson Street, this is Beekman Street. Beekman Ave. All right, Sean, you know the city, you know the village better than I do.
Just saying.
Yeah, so a 2, a 3, and a 2, no parking, right around the corner. DePaster, which is very, very comparable, finally got it right. 131 and 129, a 3-fam and a 2-fam with 0 parking. And you know that concludes the presentation. The rest of it is just from the architectural set, and we've seen many, many times. With that, I'm open to any questions, comments that anyone may have.
Any additional questions from the board?
How many bedrooms are going to be on the 3rd?
On the 3rd floor, 2 bedrooms.
One question for you.
Yeah, of course.
I noticed that the lot area numbers changed from what's existing to what's proposed. And What is that a reflection of?
So
On the zoning compliance, it indicates
So,
3762,
the
and it goes up to 3880.
the lot area is 3965. Where do you see, which page is that on, Sean?
Oh, I see, I'm looking at the floor area ratio number.
Oh.
Okay, I apologize.
No, that's good.
So 3965.
Yep, 3965.
Thank you.
All right, I will make a motion to, thank you, and I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Of course.
All in favor? Okay, if, understand there's going to be public comment, so we just ask that you state your name, the address where you live, and we welcome public comment.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Maciak, and I own the Bridgeview Tavern. I've been a lifelong resident of Sleepy Hollow. I've owned the Bridgeview for 40 years. I've been a trustee, and I've been a member of the zoning board. I feel that this project is much too big, okay? And I want this gentleman to develop. There's been 2-3 houses built on Hudson Street, and they've been one-family homes. He built one that was a little bit bigger than that, didn't provide much parking for it. Hudson Street, most of these houses that he's comparing to are 70, 80 years old. And as time goes on, we're getting rid of them. People are moving out, old families have lived there, the children are taking over the houses, and they're being torn down and redeveloped. I believe that your job is to keep the character of Hudson Street, to allow people to build, but not to overbuild, okay? When I was trustee, I built that parking lot down on Hudson Street for 13 cars because 30 years ago it was a problem. Ever since I've owned the restaurant, I've always had parking because I respect my neighbors and I knew the problems it would cause. Even now, I let a lot of neighbors park in the lot because of the problem with the parking. If this development, if this house was scaled down, it might take him a little bit longer to get his investment back, okay? But he would probably meet most of these variances if it was scaled down. You had, I don't remember the exact numbers of Hudson Street, but I guess about 15 years ago, the gentleman, Livingston, that built the one-family house, 2 houses down from my place. And then there was another gentleman, built another one-family home. I'm not saying build a one-family home. I'm saying build a 2-family home and try and get enough parking places. But right now, if you don't change these streets, if these streets stay like this, years ago, there was no zoning, okay? But now, you can make them better. And this is a good street. This is a street that people have lived there. There's people here tonight that have lived on that street for 50, 60 years. And they maintain their homes, they take care of their homes. If you keep doing this and keep letting people build or overbuild, it's gonna kill the street and it's gonna kill the town, believe me. It's gonna kill the town. You know, it's like a GM development. It took so much time to make sure that it wasn't overbuilt, okay? And people still complain. But I'm there and I see it. They're doing a good job. But you can't just go on what the law was 50 years ago, 60 years ago. You can't compare it. And you know, that's it. That's how I feel about it. I appreciate your time. I really do.
Thank you.
My name is Clara Teagle from 38 Hudson Street. I've reviewed the zoning board of appeals application submitted by Brian Hopkins and Alex Tang for the proposed house to be built at 46 Hudson Street. And this proposal, if approved, will be to the detriment to the owners of 48 Hudson Street. The proposed side yard of 2 feet 7 inches between 46 Hudson Street, owner Alex Tang, and 48 Hudson Street owners William White, Fanny Allen, Joyce Allen is unacceptable for the following reasons. On the south side of 48 Hudson Street, they wouldn't be able to access their home. So therefore, they would not be able to get to their bathroom vent, which is on the south side. There's windows on the south side, which they would not be able to access to repair. There's telephone lines on that south side also, which they wouldn't be able to access. There's, if you wanted to do cleanup between the buildings, you wouldn't be able to access it. And also I have a concern with fire. The efficiency of getting between 48 and 46 Hudson Street, that's a cause for concern. And also, currently there's a driveway between 48 Hudson Street and 46 Hudson Street that's approximately 10 feet wide. And the proposal to cut a new driveway between 46 Hudson Street, Alex Sang, and 42 Hudson Street, the owner Jeff White, is unnecessary. Instead, leave the driveway between 48 Hudson Street and 46 Hudson Street and make the side yard 5 feet between 46 Hudson Street, Alex Sang, and 42 Hudson Street, the owner Jeff White. With 5 feet between 46 Hudson Street and 42 Hudson Street, this would give Jeff White access to the north side of his house, which he never had, nor did the previous owner. The total width for the proposal should be reduced so that 46 Hudson Street owner Alex Tang is not built against 48 Hudson Street, the owners Lillian White, Fanny Allen, and Joyce Allen, or 42 Hudson Street, Jeff White. Now, there are questions that were on that zoning board of appeals application, part 2 of 5. And question 5 had, is a property subject to any variances, covenants, easements, or restrictions? And the answer checked was yes. And the explanation from the applicant was there is an existing property line with the neighbor at 48 Hudson Street. Well, yes, there is an existing property line. So 46 Hudson Street should not be allowed to build 2 feet 7 inches from 48 Hudson Street. In other words, flush against 48 Hudson Street. There's 6, area variance. And it says, explain specifically how this application satisfies each of the following criteria and refer to and attach any documentation that supports your position. A, whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance. Now, the explanation from the applicant was the character of the neighborhood will be enhanced and is more in keeping with recent R5 zoning changes. And my response is there will be an undesirable change affecting 48 Hudson Street. The proposal for the side yard of 2 feet 7 inches between 46 Hudson Street and 48 Hudson Street will cause 48 Hudson Street to be unable to access their south side, which I previously mentioned. They wouldn't be able to fix their bathroom vent if they had to, telephone lines, they wouldn't be able to service their windows, repair vinyl siding, clean up between the buildings, and there's a concern for efficient access in case of fire. B, whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than an area variance. Now, the explanation from the applicant was none. The lot size is existing. Well, my response is that's not specific. If the lot size is existing, then there's no variance required. D, whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district. And the explanation from the applicant was CA. Now, my response is Schedule A is a description of the property survey. It doesn't specifically explain the proposed variance. Once again, a proposed side yard 2 feet 7 inches between 48 Hudson Street and 46 Hudson Street will have an adverse effect specifically to 48 Hudson Street. 48 Hudson Street, as I previously said, will be unable to access the south side of the property, preventing them from doing anything. If there's a problem with their bathroom vent, telephone lines, to service windows, to repair vinyl siding, clean up between the buildings, efficient access in case of fire. F, state any additional information that you believe would be helpful to the board in making a determination. The explanation from the applicant was any development on Hudson Street will require a lot area variance. My response is that's a general statement and doesn't specifically address 46 Hudson Street. Furthermore, the zoning was changed from R4A to R5, but that should not be construed to mean that every property needs to be built to the max. Certainly neighboring properties should not be adversely affected. Another concern, according to the zoning compliance form, the required building height is 45 feet maximum. The proposed is 39 feet 8 inches. Variance indicates NA. Does NA mean not applicable or not available?
Not applicable.
Okay. All right. I need to know the height of 46 Hudson Street will cause a carbon monoxide problem that will cause 48 Hudson Street or 42 Hudson Street. The need to modify their chimneys in case to prevent carbon monoxide poison. This situation occurred when 34 Hudson Street was built. The chimney was for 36 Hudson Street had to be altered. The application included land surveys by Ramsey Land Surveying, PC. On the diagram, the first house indicates number 48, lands belonging to James Evans. Second house indicates number 46. And the third house indicates number 40, lands belonging to Bridget Dealey. The issue is the third house, number 40. Bridget Dealey owned 50 Hudson Street, not number 40. So that notation is incorrect. 40 Hudson Street is currently owned by Lindsay Krakauer, previously owned by Helen Mankum. And since there's a seal on the survey, it's unclear why the houses are in the incorrect sequence and the house number for lands belonging to Bridget Dealey is wrong. Another concern is a parking problem on Hudson Street. It's a real problem. It's not temporary. It's not because people are going to the train station and that there would be a parking available for the residents of that street. You move your car, your space is gone. So concerning 46 Hudson Street, I see a problem with a proposal for 3 cars on their property. Property is a small area, so it's maneuverability. They're not able to maneuver those cars in there. They're going to be parking on the street. Make no mistake. The main problem of this proposal is the adverse effect to 48 Hudson Street.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify that if we grant the variance tonight, the variance will not be for 2 feet 7 inches on the north side. It will be for 3 feet.
Okay, but 2 feet 7 inches, I mean, if you do a rounding, that's 3 feet. And so 3 feet is even ridiculous. Considering right now you have the, and I don't want to be contentious, I'm not going to argue here, but right now you have a driveway between that area, and that driveway has been there for years. So now all you're doing is you're taking the driveway, and you have a slip for that already, and you're taking it and you're moving it to between 46 and 42. So you're satisfying 42 at the expense of 48.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to, my name is William White. I live at 48 Hudson Street. I'd like to thank Mr. Masiak and Ms. Teagle for their advocacy of this, this project. The My family has been in Tarrytown for over 138 years. We have owned that property for over 138 years. Right now, as was mentioned, there's a 10-foot gap between 46 and 48 Hudson Street. The proposed project is requesting to build up to 42 inches, or I guess for tonight, 30 inches or 36 inches from our structure. On the south side of our house, we have 3 windows, 2 bedrooms and a hall. Putting that structure that close to our house will take away one, sunlight and ventilation and privacy. I don't know the reasons for that project moving the structure that close. I have no idea what the reasons are, but it doesn't make any sense in terms of being a good developers, being a good neighbor. I know the street is going to change, but doing such a project and infringing on the neighbor that structure would do is not appropriate, in my opinion. It also should be considered the technical issue of putting that house that close to ours. And that issue would be the wind issue. Right now, the prevailing westerlies is the main concern. Putting that building would create a wind tunnel that could potentially damage the existing structure, which is our structure. There have been a lot of studies done on the Hudson, on the wind turbulence that would be caused between the buildings, and I don't know if if that study has been given to you, or have you ever taken up that study. But if there's any damage because of the closeness of the building based from the wind, would be the cause of the new structure going up there. Finally, based on the wind, I'd like to say that street was, the developers of that street many years ago really knew what they were doing, because that was a tree-lined street, which would cut the winds coming from the river into that street. Now, there's no trees on the street, and so the wind has free access to all those buildings on that street. And maybe the village has to look at that again, and maybe consider putting up those trees as windbreakers from the Hudson. But to be a good neighbor and put a structure flat against a building that has been there for 138 years, that is not appropriate. I don't know why and what advantage that would give you, but what is there now should suffice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Ed Olivera, 24 Hudson Street. To piggyback, so Hudson Street, and as a lot of the village does, we do welcome renovation in the village, but this would be at the expense of residents in the neighborhood. This can't be perpetuated. When I did, I had to go for variance before this board back in '87, and I had to provide parking. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten the variance at number 24. Upon review of zoning requirements, as was mentioned, we do have a few issues that Clara was touching on. You know, would Parking would be a detriment to the neighborhood. It is already. Parking is already. It's not, I'm there pretty much every day. We do get the occasional people to the train station, but most of its residents and a lot of people have to park on Beekman Avenue. They have to park. They have to park and then walk to their homes or park on River Street. They have people across the street, they're on River Street, they look for parking, and that's just the way it is. It has nothing to do with, there is on occasion people from going to the train, but that's not it. 3-family is excessive. Even though you don't, their bedroom requirement is less, parking requirement is less for a 2-family because of the bedroom, because of the occupancy of it. The ratio is different because it would be much less likely that, just by default, that families, if you're gonna have a family in there, you're not gonna have family of different, you're not gonna have a rooming house. So you won't have older people with all those cars. The variance, while still required, can be reduced, touching on the criteria for New York State. It can be reduced. It was acknowledged whether they get the benefit, and like Steve mentioned, whether it might take longer to recoup the money. That's a problem of the applicant. And actually, let me segue to that, and that would be obviously a self-created issue. They knew what zoning was then, they knew what the standards were, what could be and what should be, and what may not be, and that is something that you just can't go and assume that you're gonna get a 3-family variance. 2-family, like I said, while renovation would be wonderful, it's great to see everybody do it, I did it and people were happy when I did it, but there are a lot of conditions that have to be met. The only thing, again, would the proposed variance have an adverse impact on it? Yeah, parking. Parking is it. As far as setbacks, side yard setbacks are an issue. My building is touching the building next door. But that's the way, as Mr. Williams said, White said, that's the way it was. 60, 80, my building I think is close to 100 years old. And that's just the way it was back then. You didn't have the amount of cars, you didn't have the amount of people. And the variance, though, would mostly be in character with the neighborhoods, like that was mentioned, Clinton and all of that. The fact is, this is substantial and does not change the fact that variance is still needed. We also have snow issues. There is no parking on there. I mean, snow removal has to be considered. I'm wondering what's going to happen with even the parking in the back. People end up, even more parking spaces, end up parking on the street. And this would be at the expense of Hudson Street and adjoining neighbors. Please do not let this project move forward as is. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public that would like to speak on the application? Briefly, Mr. White.
Yes, just briefly, I did submit a letter
We received it.
Yes.
with references to the agencies that have done studies on the wind studies, and I'm hoping that you will consider that in your deliberations of the project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor? Does the board have any comments on the application? I can provide my thoughts. So, at the prior hearing 2 months ago, the applicant sought a building that was larger than what is being proposed to us right now. Larger in 2 aspects. One, the applicant was proposing a north side setback of 2 feet 7 inches, which would have meant that that north wall would have had to have been fire rated. That's my understanding of the code. But now the applicant has added the additional 5 inches, and there's going to be a 3-foot separation on the north side, which enables the applicant to actually have windows on the north side when the applicant was prohibited from doing that if it was 2 feet 7 inches. So what the applicant did is, 1, reduce the need for combined side yard setback, and 2, is proposing a more aesthetic building. The second thing the applicant did is reduce the number of bedrooms from the last hearing from 7 to 6, which practically creates the likelihood of less of a parking strain on the neighborhood had this been a 7-bedroom. And the big point I think we have to all appreciate is the applicant could go to a 2-family and put in 8 bedrooms, 9 bedrooms. You know, there's 7, it's a 2-family, 7-bedroom. It was a 2-family, 7-bedroom building, and it was larger than the footprint that the applicant is proposing. And so what the applicant has done is bring the number of bedrooms down while increasing the number of families. You know, there's really a reasonable potential that the parking demand from this building is going to be the same as that existed before. And not only that, as a developer with the opportunity to do whatever the developer can do with that site, if the developer was limited to a 2-family, well, go ahead and put in 8 bedrooms, and that would be a more valuable building. But that's not what the applicant is proposing. The applicant is proposing 6 bedrooms, 3-family, and so I frankly don't see a material difference or an increased burden on the neighborhood based on what the applicant is proposing. I can't put my hands on it and see it in terms of the parking requirement. The applicants agreed that, you know, look, we're not going to charge the tenants extra to park in the spots behind the house, and you know, as we see from Edge on Hudson, you can't get in the parking garage unless you pay the fee, and people aren't entering the garage because they can find a spot in the neighborhood. And that's a real problem. So I think that's, you know, a positive side of the application, and you know, may help mitigate matters on a go-forward basis. And Sean, I assume if that's part of the variance, that can be made known in some respect to the prospective tenants.
I think they can include that in your lease agreement, probably.
And the building department would enforce that if they were getting charged, if it was part of the variance.
Yes. It would be in violation of the variance. And we would all, if in fact it moves forward as a condition of approval, it'll also roll into site plan approval as well, as part of the site plan approval. Have that requirement as a condition.
So that's my general feeling on the parking, and you know, as far as the way the house is going to be put on the lot, you know, moving it from the south side border to the closer to the north side border, I understand the concerns, but there is going to be 3 feet of access. I'm assuming that the developer is going to be a good neighbor and allow 48 Hudson Street access to whatever reasonable, for whatever reasonable needs there are to repair 48 Hudson Street. And you know, it's generally within the applicant's rights, you know, to decide, okay, which side of the lot the building is going to be on. So as far as the front yard setback, I mean, obviously this house is going to be the same as basically every house on the block. And as far as the pre-existing small condition of the lot, it's not 5,000 feet, it's 3,965. I mean, that's just something that the landowner or the developer is just going to have to deal with, that they've been dealing with a long time. It just comes with the lot. So, you know, I understand that this is a self-created hardship. There may be other potential ways to do this, but what the applicant has done, I think, is a reasonable proposal. And, you know, in my mind, as far as an undesirable change to the character of the neighborhood, you know, there are multiple 3 families there, and fact that this property is going to be developed in the way that it's being proposed. It's aesthetic, so I don't think it's going to be an overall detriment. And I don't think the parking area variance is substantial when you compare it to some alternatives that the applicant has in front of it. So those are just my general comments.
I have a question for Sean.
Could we turn up the volume? I have a hearing problem, and I can't really hear anything.
Sean,
And I have hearing aids in.
Sean, I have a question. Now, with any proposal a building, the fire codes and everything have to be in place, right? They, like the sprinkler system and,
Yes, this building will have to have a automatic fire sprinkler system throughout the building.
throughout the buildings, with alarms and all that.
Any smoke, fire alarms, carbon monoxide detection, and any, also ratings between the different dwelling units too. So there'll be
Okay.
fire separations between each apartment.
How about between the side that faces that will now be 3 feet from the, is there
That
any
will
special
not-
requirements for
No,
that?
that will not require a special rating.
Okay, thank you.
I also have a question for Sean, and I'm sorry, I should know this, but I don't, and maybe others don't as well. So, in trying to calculate the
Please speak
combined...
into the microphone.
Thank you for reminding me. In calculating the requirements versus the proposed for the side yard combined, or the side yard north, right?
Yes.
So, is it true that if they satisfied that, as of right, they could build all the way to the property line within the R5? What's the
No.
absolute, okay, so what's the absolute closest they could get to the property line as of right?
So as of right, the minimum side yard is 5 feet,
Mm-hmm.
and then the combined side yard setbacks have to add up to at least 15 feet. So if you go to the minimum, you had 5, you would need 10 on the other side.
Right. So it's actually twofold that this variance, if accepted, would be doing, allowing it to be 2 feet closer than the minimum, if the minimum's 5 feet.
Correct.
Is that correct
That's
interpretation? And making the total less than 15 by making it 13.
2 feet less, correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Right, so for all the reasons I just stated, I'll make a motion to approve the application. I won't repeat what I just said, but again, we are voting on a north side setback of 3 feet, not 2 feet 7 inches. And as a condition of granting the variance, the applicant cannot charge an additional fee to each tenant, and each unit will have access to one spot. Is there a second? All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Pam, I'm sorry, was that 60?
No, I don't think Sandy did.
I'm sorry. Okay, we need to poll the board.
Can we pull the board, please? Mr. Chen? Thank you. Ms. Crowe?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's all right. I know you are.
Okay, the second item on the agenda is Dennis and Margaret Kraft at 124 Hunter Avenue, proposed 4-foot fence. Please take notice that the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Village of Sleepy Hollow will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, March 15, 2023, at 7 p.m. in the Municipal Building, 28 Beekman Avenue, Sleepy Hollow, New York, to receive comments from the public on the application submitted by Dennis and Margaret Kraft seeking approval to install 4-foot fencing in the front yards where the following variance from Chapter 450 of the Code of the Village of Sleepy Hollow is required. Article 7, 450-40 F2, supplementary regulations, coverage and open space, fences and walls, maximum permitted fence height, front yard 3 feet, proposed fence height 4 feet. The property involved in the application is located at 124 Hunter Avenue, is situated in the R2 zoning district, and is shown on town tax assessment maps as section 110.19, block 1, lot 33. A copy of the application and accompanying documents are available for review at the Department of Architecture, Land Use Development, Buildings and Building Compliance during normal business hours, or may be reviewed and downloaded from the village's website. Written comments may also be sent in a manner ensuring receipt by 4 p.m. on the day of the public hearing by mail to Chairperson Timothy Church, care of the Village of Sleepy Hollow, Department of Architecture, Land Use Development, Buildings and Building Compliance, 28 Beekman Avenue, Sleepy Hollow, New York, or by email to smccarthy@villageofsleepyhollow.org. All people are entitled to attend and be heard at this public hearing by order of the Zoning Board of Appeals for the Village of Sleepy Hollow. And with the application, we have the Village of Sleepy Hollow's December 14, 2022 letter rejecting the permit for the proposed fence. We have the Zoning Board of Appeals complete application, and we have a printout of the type of proposed fence, as well as photographs of the property where the proposed fence is to be situated. And Sean, have all the returns from the neighbors been received on this application?
Yeah, all the returns are sent. Yes.
Thank you. So welcome, and we look forward to hearing your application.
We're not as skilled as,
We're not architects.
It's quite all right.
We are both
We're patient.
professional people, but we're both professionals in different professions. We just wanted to first show where, this is the, doesn't quite fit on here.
Survey.
This is a survey, and that shows the property line. I wanted to show how far the property line is from the street. On this side, it's 12 feet to the street, and from the front, the blue line is where we're proposing to put a fence. It would tie into the house at that point, or into the garage, go along the property line there, 200 feet, cut across that point, come down on Hunter, and then come back perpendicular to Hunter, and to tie into the house. At the very top of the property, it's 22 feet to that stop sign at Bellwood. So I want to point this out because it's not going to be a visual impediment to people coming around the corner. The only real impediment there might be the hedges, which are not on our property. On this side, it's 20 feet from the proposed fence to the street, and pretty much along all the way here, it's about 20 feet set back from the street.
it's also below the street level.
Right.
So we're below
So-
the street.
So the elevation of Bellwood Avenue is higher than the elevation of our lot.
Just on Bellwood.
On Bellwood. So what we wanted to show you is what it's going to look like. This is the kind of fence we're talking about. So you can see through it. We're not going to have a barrier that you can't see through. I need to rotate this, I guess. So the point here is the black line here is the property line, and just trying to show you how far back it is. From the hedges on the street, actually set back from the street. Okay, is there a way to look at this? Wrong way. Nope.
Can you
Rotate
see it
pages.
like that?
Do I need a free trial to rotate the page?
I think we have hard copies of the.
Yes.
Have your hard copy. So-
I know, right?
Yeah, so this is simply trying to show you how far back the property line is and how much of this yard is actually going to be outside the fence. So we're not coming along the street. This is showing, this graph is again showing where the property line is versus the street. So I think that's me standing there to show you, I'm standing on the property line. And the picture's taken from the
From the
curb.
street, from the curb, yeah.
So you can see the fence is significantly back from the curb, not going to be blocking things. This is again, this is a view from Hunter. The tree is at the property line.
But in front of the tree, a little
The
bit.
property line is right there. There's a marker right there, orange property line. I'm standing on the property line where the fence would be. This is Hunter Avenue. So you can see that the stop sign is this here. So we're significantly back from the stop sign. Not going to be blocking that. This is another view of the same thing from a different angle.
So
So all of these are views.
Who owns the, yeah, if that's your property line, who owns the front of the yard?
Between there and the
You do.
street.
The village of Sleepy Hollow?
Wow, I want some of that on my street.
Well, it's actually, we would prefer it, the Sleepy Hollow actually put a sidewalk there because it looks strange a little
And
bit.
we
There,
would-
all of a sudden our property, there was no survey on file.
When we bought the house,
There was no
no
survey, and so we've actually had 2 surveys done just to double check because it seemed kind of odd. But I think the point is that
It's far back from the
it's
street.
really far back.
It's not gonna obstruct the view coming, I think the major concern would be if there's that pointy intersection, we don't wanna block the intersection view. Personally, I'd prefer to have the fence closer to the street, but it would be building on the village property. I don't know.
I mean, either
What we have
way.
to do to get that happening.
That sounds too difficult. I think our point is to show how, my understanding, first off, we don't have another option. We don't have a backyard.
There's no backyard.
Otherwise, we would certainly do that.
The house is at the back near the back of the lot. There's only 50 feet behind the house.
When we moved here, actually, we have a neighbor in support. When we moved here, actually, we spent thousands of dollars cutting, see where the stop sign is, right there? There was some, I guess it was a bush that covered the stop sign, and I think even the street name. Plus, no one knew that there was a guardrail right there.
There's a guardrail on the other
So
side.
that's the way the property was for, I guess, years. And so we spent quite a bit of money to actually make it less obstructive. And look, we don't want it to be obstructive
So this is
either.
yeah.
So it's dangerous. And we care about what the property looks like. We've hired a landscape architect, a landscaper. So we'll do whatever it takes to, and we're also like the first house you see pretty much when you turn.
Turn it off, yeah.
So-
We didn't, I think if we had known that the hedges blocked everything, if we'd realized they were on your property instead of ours, we might not have spent several $1,000s trimming them back and trimming back all the bushes.
I think we knew
You
already.
could not see
You couldn't see
the
it.
street signs or anything before, so I think we wanted to, we would have done that anyway, I guess, but,
So this is a corner lot.
pardon?
This is a corner lot.
It's a corner, yes, it's the street, the
That's
streets
why.
have come to an end like this.
So we don't have a side yard,
Interpretation things, I think,
Yeah.
right?
we don't have a side yard or a backyard.
This is the only yard we have.
And remind me again, Sean, the distance, and I know in this case it's a property line, but the distance from what is it, the curb or whatever that you don't need, that you can build whatever size fence, what is it 20 feet? Back?
Actually, no, it's 30 feet.
30, okay.
What was that? If
30
you're-
feet.
If you're 30 feet back, then you can build whatever size you want?
No,
Oh.
you can build up to 3 feet within the front yard.
Within the front
And
yard.
beyond the 30 feet, you can go to 5 feet.
Okay, got it, okay.
Yeah.
So we're asking for 4. And the main reason is because we have a dog that, when she was younger, could have jumped that, and we assume we're getting another dog.
And we take good care of dogs. They're very well behaved. It's just, we have a lot of yard that we won't use when I have kids or anything. And dogs are my passion. I've always wanted to I was just really disappointed, as you can imagine. A 3-foot fence probably isn't safe. We're also on a busy street and we're next to Broadway. But, if we had other you know, I think the reason for them not having a forfeit is obstructive view, and this will be far from obstructive.
Are you proposing to put the fence on the street side of the hedges?
No, that's not our property.
It's not
No,
It's
they're
not.
way back,
They're
if you
way
look,
back.
they're
I mean,
just
it's-
12 feet from the, in the middle of their yard is where they're
It's
putting the
exactly,
look like-
How
yeah.
would Sean?
That's why we
I'm
hired
sorry.
an architect,
Yeah.
is to make it look a little bit better, because our property line is so far back.
Right.
I'm
Yeah,
just,
It's gonna
It's
be,
hard to process this.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the site survey, and there's a blue line.
the blue line is where the fence would be. The black line is the property line, not the street.
Right. so
Yeah, it would be
street
helpful if
is
there was a
not
street,
on the
yeah,
survey.
So when
Yeah,
I wrote
it's
20
not.
feet to street on Bellwood, that's 20 feet to the curb from that point. And when I wrote 22 feet to stop sign, from that point out to where the stop sign is 22 feet. So we're not in the street, we're on our side, it's 12 feet.
Our property line is stunning.
Yeah, so like this
That's all.
picture helps, because it gives you a sense of, there's their property line, that's where they're putting the fence. It's 12 feet on this side from the curb.
So you're putting it on the,
I won't say it's right.
behind the hedges?
Way
Yeah.
behind
Oh,
the
way
hedges.
behind the
Way behind,
hedges.
yeah.
I mean, like, wait.
I'm not getting that from the site survey.
Right.
It's confusing.
That's because the site survey doesn't show where the street is.
Street.
Yeah.
It shows the property line, but not the street line.
Yes.
So how far back from the street is the fence going to be?
About 20 feet on Bellwood Avenue
Whatever needs to be,
and about 12 feet on Hunter Avenue.
or whatever it needs to be for the, whatever the requirement is there.
And behind whatever hedges exist?
Yeah, that's not our property. The hedges are not our property.
Got it, okay.
A lot of it is in our property, which was stunning.
It's gonna be a little
I
funny.
mean, our property line starts right by our garage. We've had people come and put markers, like a surveyor come and put markers, just because there, like I said, when we bought the house, there wasn't which, well, in retrospect, maybe we should know. But we don't have any other option. A 3-foot fence is probably like here, it's just not enough, and a 4-foot fence is still not that high, and it simply will not be obstructive.
But why do you think a 3-foot fence isn't high enough to prevent dogs from, getting out? I just don't
Because-
understand that.
A dog could have jumped a 3-foot fence.
Our dog could have jumped a 3-foot fence easily, and I take good care of my dogs, but I get rescue dogs, and they have a very high prey drive, and I will tell you that they can jump a 3-foot fence.
Are
That's sort of
there,
busy
are there any
street.
other fences on Hunter Avenue?
No, not on Hunter, there's some, I think on DeVries,
There are
there's
some on
one's
Bellwood
corner.
farther down.
farther down.
by Del-
But I don't want to talk about neighbors, or whatever, but there's a lot of obstructive corners from hedges and bushes.
Well, I'm not talking about obstructive corners, I'm just talking about fences in general. I'm not aware of any fences on Hunter. What's the nearest fence on Bellwood on your side that you can think of?
I think there's several fences, but there's no front yard. I mean, I think there are, I know
There
on
are
Hunter there
side
actually
yards.
are in side yards.
They're on side
I
yards.
can't tell you exactly how
I
many.
would say, I don't know,
Right, they're on side yards, so they don't run the length of Bellwood until,
some of them are pretty big, but I'm thinking of a house where the house is facing, I think it's on a corner, but the house is facing, and I can't think of the street, it's not Harwood or Kelmore, but one of those. And then the side yard is on Bellwood, so there's a fence there, it's a side yard.
Yeah, so there are corner homes with fences, but they actually have, our door is at a corner, so I think it makes us have 2 front yards. So we have a corner house,
Our front door faces the pointy corner.
so we have no side yards.
On this house.
I don't know, it's very confusing.
Yeah, I drove past a lot. I didn't really appreciate the whole corner issue when I drove past. it's just, I have driven up and down Bellwood and Hunter, and a fence is out of character, at least on Hunter.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is a couple of things. I don't know, I'm supposed to be
Sure,
talking now. My concern is a couple of things. So always for me, it's precedent. So we've declined other fences, requesting you to go from 3 feet to 4 feet, because 3 feet, there's pretty clear guidelines on
Right.
more traditional or regular shaped lots in particular. And yours is an irregular shaped lot. It's a corner lot, and there's some interpretation that I think needs to be done about what the front versus the side versus the corner, and Sean can probably speak to that much better than I, but my point is, we've declined other requests to go from a 3 foot to a 4 foot just based on a dog or just based on a need. So I don't think it's good precedent for us to do that in this case based on that alone.
Based on
The fact that you want to contain a dog going from 3 feet to 4 feet, because that's always going to be, like, we call that a self-created problem. You heard us talking about that in the prior thing, right? So I think the bigger issue is here. So say that, let's just think ahead 10 years. So that isn't your property. That's actually the village's property. What if they decide to put a sidewalk in and those bushes go away? And now there's, they could go all the way up to your property line. And now you've got a fence right on the edge of the property line, and it might be the only fence within the entire neighborhood. So I'm just kind of, you know,
How is that detrimental?
well, it's
I don't think
subject
that's
to
detrimental.
interpretation, and I appreciate that. It's subject to interpretation, but if we, you know, our job is to follow what the rules are and then say when it's appropriate to change the rules. And so I'm just trying to give you the perspective of,
So,
you know,
right,
different
well,
ways that we
hedges
need
are
to
also
look at
supposed
it.
to be 3 feet, and that property for years has, on village land, has had hedges and bushes that were
Fair.
obstructing the
Yeah.
view.
If you want to keep 3 feet variance,
And
you want to cut
trust
your own
me,
bushes down.
I
Well, it's per
understand.
fence.
I'm sorry,
So that-
it's
that's-
the
yeah, it's-
homeowner's
Yes.
responsibility to maintain those bushes,
Oh,
not the
okay.
village.
So sorry,
Oh, didn't know that.
just go sit down. Go sit down. I understand the precedent, but, you know, and certainly if it's the same situation where the house has this extremely far setback, like if it's, I understand precedent for the same situation, not just because it's a house, it's a corner house. We have this really unusually far setback, and my understanding is because we don't want to create obstruction. And this clearly will not create it. So if we can prove that it won't create obstruction,
Yeah, and
you know, it's just so far back, and plus the fence, and there actually is a corner house has a higher, but it's on DeVries, I think it's DeVries in the street before that has a higher.
Devere's in Bellwood.
And then I think there's another one
a
too.
fence?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's up to here.
Yeah, that's what we were asking, so what the
Yeah.
precedent was.
If he was
at-
in the
not next to us.
neighborhood.
Devere's in Bellwood, I think the fence is like my shoulder, I think, took a picture.
Yeah, I took a picture. I'm not gonna show other homes, I'm just saying that there's plenty of completely obstructed views on Riverview, Riverside. We're new, by the way, we haven't been here for 100 years, so,
If we had a side yard, we would fence the side yard.
easily.
If we had a backyard, we would fence the
we'd
backyard.
I would rather
We were
that.
told both of our yard, or both sides are front yards. That's what we were told.
Well, that's the tricky thing
And
with the
that's-
corner lot, that's where
Yeah, and
I
that's,
feel
that's
that-
my frustration, and that's why I asked Sean that question, because a lot of times what we're able to do, which actually I did in my own house, right? Again, the 3-foot fence was not gonna be good enough for the dog. If it went to the corner of my house, which would have been the best case scenario, I would have needed a variance, so I just put it back. And I have that because I have a nice large distance from the front of my house to the back. You don't have that option, and that's my, you know,
You
because a lot of
don't.
times we can turn to people and just say, well, just put it back to 30 feet.
Right.
But you'd have to go 30 feet from both sides, you'd end up with a bowling alley for a fence, I think,
Yes,
at
we
that
would.
point, so.
And
You know,
precedents
that's-
are,
yeah.
have, you know, are, there's nothing, I understand not wanting to set a precedent when it's not necessary, but
Absolutely.
this seems like it might be necessary.
We just don't have other options. So I did try, like I said, we had someone come and do a second survey and put markers. I said, you know, let's make this better. Let's just take the corner of the house and kind of make a side yard, and that'll be plenty. But when we looked at that, it was barely in a yard because our setback is so far on Bellwood, it would just be a little run. So I tried to like put chairs and figure out how to do this, to make it better, multiple ways. Because I don't want this anymore. It's been very stressful and disappointing, so. But we, you know, like I said, we've hired a landscape architect since unfortunately we care about we care about our neighbors. Apparently our neighbors are okay with it and has talked to other. In fact, when we moved here, and I don't know if it was you, we got people to come and clean that out, show the stop sign, show Hunter, and apparently neighbors were texting each other saying, oh my God, have you seen the property and what they're doing? We had someone drive by and stop their car and say, wow, it looks great. You couldn't see anything. And it was like that for years.
Our plans are to make this over time, a very presentable, wonderful looking house. I mean, we understand it's the first thing you see when you drive in from Bellwood off of Broadway, it's that house. And we want it to be on a showpiece, but we also want to have a place to keep our dog. I don't see how a 4-foot fence is detrimental in any way to that.
With that setback, of course.
What's the distance from the property line where you want to put the fence to your flagstone there?
To what?
To that flagstone walkway?
Oh, a few, on the one side, it's basically almost adjacent.
It's really.
The property line touches the corner of the garage. The flagstone walk actually goes outside the line of the garage. The flagstone walk goes onto the town property.
Like we walk on town property.
Okay.
What, parallel to Hunter, where is the fence going to be?
12 feet back from the street,
Or whatever
whatever the distance.
whatever it needs to be. Our property line starts a little more reasonable on Hunter, but if it needs to be back further, it'll be back further.
Okay. Parallel to Route 9.
To what?
Route 9. I'm just using Route 9 as a gauge. I know you're not on Route 9, but the north-south part of the fence, how far will that be from?
We don't have a north-south. The north.
No, I get it. It
Right,
just,
so
Is there a
how
picture?
far is it from Route 9, or how far is it from?
no, not Route 9. Let me ask it differently. Do you propose that part of the fence go north-south?
I guess it's running, I think,
That would be Bellwood.
approximately, the Hunter Avenue, I guess, is what? Is that east-west?
That's east-west.
So this is running, northeast to southwest.
Yeah, north is on the survey.
Pardon me?
The north arrow is on the survey.
Yeah.
And remember our Bellwood, at least our Bellwood is below street level. So as it is right now, you probably wouldn't even see the fence.
Yeah, you can, so we don't have anything going.
You don't have nothing going north-south, right? Okay. And so then,
I'm confused.
Confused
So
too.
are we,
I'm just trying to follow. I'm
It's
with you.
hard,
And we're not
yeah.
trying to make this harder than it needs to be. I know this is very difficult and stressful. I'm just looking at the site plan, and there's blue going along the yard, what appears to me to be north-south.
there's what?
I'm trying to understand the line of the fence, because
Okay, the blue is, what we thought we would do is, we would cut the fence in at this spot.
so yes,
So-
north-south.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
That's how I interpret that too. Okay,
That's how, that's not very.
that's okay, that's north-south, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's,
That's
so the fence would go.
Are you
from-
looking at the stretch next to the flagstone walk? Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on that side, yes, on that, that's a flagstone.
Yeah. I was referring to the one on Bellwood.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the.
There's two flagstone walks.
Out here, the walking street is out, the driveway is over here.
Got it.
So, yes, here it would be running that way.
Thank you.
And it's-
Thank you.
I mean, I understand the precedent. I've given that a lot of thought. But I think the purpose of not having a 4-foot fence on this property has to do with obstruction, and that's not going to happen. And we have a very unusual circumstance here, where we really don't have another option.
So that's what exceptions are made for.
So I have to say, I'm just unclear as to where the fence is going to be located vis-a-vis the streets. All right. I think you make a really good point about Bellwood and your property being lower, right? And so, there will be any obstruction, and looking down at the fence reduces the,
And if I can show, this graph, this picture here shows.
I get the picture, but.
I'm standing on a property. So that's, the fence would be where I'm standing.
I know, but is it 4 feet going all the way to Hunter?
So it's 4 feet going to the corner.
Going straight to the street, so it's 4 feet all the way to the street.
No, it doesn't go to the street. It ends, it's 4 feet.
It's literally in the middle of our yard.
22 feet before you get to where Hunter and Bellwood is.
Yeah, this is.
It ends 22 feet. And then here's 12 feet back.
It's a hard circle that
20
we're
feet back. The street's going down out here. And we're coming, we're looking at it.
So it's 20 feet, 22 feet. Is that?
It would help.
Yeah.
It is hard to wrap your brain around.
Put some flags out there.
Oh.
Yeah, because we had
Yeah.
some- It is a little confusing.
Yeah, the survey is not clear.
It's not clear at all. So we paid for a second one, and it's the same. Maybe even a little worse than the first one. Unfortunately.
So my overarching point is, the manors have a particular characteristic to them. They're essentially open. Yes, obstruction of cars is an issue when we're putting in fences, but just generally speaking, there are few fences above 3 feet in front yards in the manors. And I'm not even aware of a fence on Hunter. I could be wrong, but I'm not aware of one. So while you're allowed a 3-foot fence, going in with a 4-foot fence, it's just different than what exists in the neighborhood. However, I get your point. It's going to be 12 feet to the street on the Hunter side, 22 to the stop sign, and 20 feet on the Bellwood side. So I understand that. I'm just throwing it open for debate.
Well, like I said, we care about the look, and we pay a lot of money to have it, and we're going to continue to pay a lot of money. So, like I said, we hired a landscape architect. We don't want...
None of that's a zoning criteria,
Oh, but I thought you said the look. Okay.
Oh, and this gentleman here also thought he needed 4-foot fences.
Right, well, that's the common argument, but then you have to change it, or you get one of
No, I'm just saying
collars that
that's
don't.
where we came up with 4 foot.
Everybody that comes before us with a fence issue says their dog can't deal with a 3-foot fence. That's not our decision.
No, I
That's
understand.
that's the rule that we are
I'm
given and have to make an exception for. So saying the dog's gonna jump it doesn't make a difference. Didn't make a difference for me, so, yeah.
I'm simply saying we didn't take 4 feet on the tree.
I think what makes this a little bit unique is the shape of the property. And if they were to adhere to like a 30-foot setback, it looks like it would impede on actually their house in some cases, right? So I think typically it's a question about precedent, but there's no precedent with a property.
A lot like
Yeah,
this.
it's not even a corner lot, it's like a triangular pennant-shaped lot,
True.
right? So I kind of feel like we really have to consider precedents when there is something consistent to decide about. This is not consistent with other lots that
Yeah.
we've decided.
And the other thing, which was, I'm sorry, Tommy, Dunk?
No, I'm good.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to. The other thing that I didn't realize till I was here is, and really looked at this closely, I would not in any way, shape, or form approve it if the property line was the street line, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So that's kind of, that's I've never come across before.
Right. No one has actually.
I do think it's also counter to precedent that they're maintaining, I mean, this has nothing to
Right.
do with this decision, but they're treating that part of their land like it's their land,
Yeah.
right? So,
And there is potentially one precedent. There's one applicant on Bellwood, I think, I'd have to pull up my map, but Tim Judge was the chairman, and
well, there's the one on Bellwood and Willard, on the corner lot there. It's a Mediterranean house. And I don't know if they have fences, but they have hedges that go way above.
There's several.
Right, yeah, a lot of.
so the hedges aren't an issue, because
Right.
The
yeah,
hedges aren't our purview, so
Yeah.
that's where it's very confusing. Hedges, we can't rule on, hedges aren't part of like an obstruction for us.
Oh,
It's
I thought
only
it was,
fences.
like,
Yeah.
that's why they only had to be 3 feet. I thought there was something that said hedges have to be 3 feet.
I'm not aware of that.
I'm
In
not
front of
aware
it.
of it.
Okay.
But either way,
Right.
right? Good, but either way, it's, that property has a clear side yard and a clear front yard, right, so.
Yeah, I think the house is on Bellwood and Palmer, and they have, I believe, a 4-foot fence, is that right?
I believe that was what was agreed upon, yeah.
Yeah, it's a 4-foot.
Setback.
Oh, yeah.
Right, the property dips down towards Bellwood, and so they put the fence on the top of the
I know
ridge.
that.
Yeah, they wanted it
The yard slopes
closer,
up
and it
it's
went,
flat.
they moved it back,
Right,
right?
so,
But they had that option to do that.
yeah. So, any,
Any other questions that we can answer? Or are we done?
well, the one,
Can we cry when I help?
and is this fence, this black fence with rails, how, do you know the distance between each rail? It's part of the issue in terms of visibility.
I think it's like 2.
I
Don't guess. You don't know.
What did you say?
Don't guess if you don't know.
Oh, wait, I thought it was 2 something. I thought it was on there.
I don't see it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not in the description? I thought it was in the description.
Wait a minute.
Oh, we will, yeah, we did it, yeah, thank
You
you.
count the number and divide by 5 feet.
I thought it was in the description.
All right,
They're less than 2 feet because there's 12 spaces in 5 feet.
okay. So I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone from the public that wants to speak on the application?
Hi, I'm Michael Every. In full disclosure, we're also here for a fence variance application today. So a bit of deja vu probably going to happen when we speak later, but a lot of the arguments, this couple of rows I haven't met before, nice to meet you. We're located on Bellwood and Debris, and so I can say at least to that side of Bellwood that there are a number of fences which do face the street, which do intersect or come across Bellwood. Some of those fences, I believe, are at least 4 foot, if not higher. I expect that the reason for that, again, obviously not anyone here a trustee, this is just me as a resident, probably because in that area in particular, a lot of the layouts of the houses and where they face is quite different. Some of them face the side streets, some of them face Bellwood, so I imagine that some of them are technically classified as a backyard or a side yard versus a front yard. But then when you're up against it as a neighbour, that same area of land is your front yard. So I just wanted to make a comment that, once again, full disclosure, we are applying for a variation ourselves. So, but I would say that there are fences, in my opinion, I haven't gone up the neighbours' yards to measure them, which are above 3 foot, which are, I think, in a common interpretation in the front yard area. I can think of one on Bellwood and Merlin. I can think of two, the one that adjacent to Phillipsburg Manor, I forget how the organisation owns that, which is Bellwood and DeVries as well.
Thank you.
So not a precedent.
Anyone? Can you just stand under the
My
microphone?
name is Gary Daly. I live at 127 Hunter, directly across the street from the Crafts, and I just met them because I moved into the neighborhood. I just wanted to say, it is an incredibly challenging lot, and what I think is going to happen is those hedges are so high, and the lot is sloped down so far, that you're not even going to see the fence from the street particularly. So it's not going to be like some huge fence that everybody's going, oh my God. And I know two of my neighbors, there are 5 houses where people could see the Crafts yard. I know 2 of them really well, the other 2 I don't know. All 3 of us have talked about it, and we think it's a great idea where nobody's upset about it. But whatever, it's your decision. I just wanted to say that I don't think it's going to be an aesthetic problem at all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Read.
Anyone else would like to speak? I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, so thank you, and I'll make a motion to approve the application. I will say, the dog issue is not persuasive to me. You could have a 3-foot fence and put in a 5-foot hedge and generally not worry about your dogs. But I think what carries the day in this application is, like Tommy said, and you said, which is an extremely difficult lot to really do what you want with the property. Also, the fence that's being proposed doesn't create any type of obstruction. And I would say if you're going to put in a fence as a condition of the variance, that it not be something you can't see through. So it's going to be at least this fence or something similar to it. But also the fact that it's recessed from the streets, which took me way too long to understand. But it's 12 feet on Hunter and 20 feet on Bellwood, is also a very significant aspect of the application. And due to the dimensions of the lot, like the public comment we just heard, we're not even really going to notice that it's a 4-foot fence as opposed to a 3-foot fence. So for all those reasons, make a motion to approve the application.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye. You win?
Thank you very much. And we appreciate Pam's help.
Yeah, Sean, you're welcome.
We would have gotten the application together.
And I speak on that.
This is the application of 4465 Monroe Avenue. Please take notice that Zoning Board of Appeals of the Village of Sleepy Hollow will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, March 15, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the Municipal Building, 28 Beekman Avenue, Sleepy Hollow, New York, to receive comments from the public on the application submitted by Sean Bell Thompson and Alexandra Electris seeking approval to construct a second-floor addition over the existing structure, 2-story rear addition in the rear to the rear, and 1-story entry addition to the front, where the following variances from Chapter 450 of the Code of Village of Sleepy Hollow are required. Article 6, 450-34B, applicability of regulations, adding to and altering an existing nonconforming building. Minimum combined side yard setback 25 feet, existing combined side yard setback 24.2 feet. Article 7, 450-35, Schedule of Regulations, minimum required combined side yard setback 25 feet, proposed combined side yard setback 24.2 feet. The property involved in the application is located at 465 Monroe Avenue, is situated in the R2 zoning district, and is shown on town tax assessment maps as section 115-7, block 4, lot 11. A copy of the application and accompanying documents are available for review at the Department of Architecture, Land Use Development, Buildings, and Building Compliance during normal business hours, or may be reviewed and downloaded from the village's website. Written comments may also be sent in a manner ensuring receipt by 4 p.m. on the day of the public hearing by mail to Chairman Timothy Church, care of the Village of Sleepy Hollow, Department of Architecture, Land Use Development, Buildings, and Building Compliance, 28 Beekman Avenue, Sleepy Hollow, New York, 10591, or by email to smccarthy@villageofsleepyhollow.org by order of the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Village of Sleepy Hollow. And in support of the application, we have a copy of the complete application, which includes the site survey, the deeds, and the proposed plans. And so, thank you for coming tonight. I'm happy to hear the application. Before I get there, have all the returns been received?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, John.
Good evening, J.B. Hernandez, Architectural Project. This is a 1,500 square foot home located on a debris and before Melling. It's right in the corner here against the park. We have a, let me go through the plan, we have a 50, this is the lot size, so we have a 1,600 square foot home currently, and we added a second story, we extended some of the room upstairs. When we go through, when we go through the setbacks, we comply with everything in the zoning except for the combined side yards, which we are on deficiency of 10 inches or 0.8 of a foot.
So you're not expanding the footprint of the house?
No, it's the same footprint.
It's the same,
which is going out.
non-conforming
Yeah.
that's there currently.
It's an existing non-conformity. Again, the existing house, which is doing a renovation downstairs, and we are putting the stairs to reach the second floor. On the second floor, on the second floor, we are creating a master suite, and there's a large family room towards the front, and there's an office space for the homeowner. As we go along, this is the existing. On the top, you see the existing house. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a little more sensitive.
Yeah.
This is what we are proposing. And these are the re-elevations. The overall height, and this is the side, the overall height of the building is, it goes up by 6 feet.
So it'll be 6 foot higher
Then
than
it's
it currently
currently
is. That's what I want to know. Thank you.
Because we're not extending a full floor, which is carving a space under the existing roof, the proposed roof. And again, this is pictures of the current home. So again, we added a second floor to it, and this is our pictures from the neighborhood. I mean, this is, we're only asking for a 3% of a variance for the combined side yards.
This house is elevated off the street, right? Is there like it's raised, the yard, there's like a retaining wall at the sidewalk, or am I thinking of the same one?
Yeah,
On the corner, as you're heading down to DeVries Park?
yes, it's slightly elevated, yes.
Thank you. Because this photo would be taken, in the middle is taken from the elevated portion, right? It's not from the street.
Right,
Up in the
and
yard.
you can tell here, I mean, you can kind of see here where the garage is buried.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry that it doesn't show the whole.
No, it's fine.
But the garage just goes downhill, and you can see it's slightly elevated, yes. And I know there was some comments received about the location of the house and the views of the neighborhood. And going back to your comment before, let me see if I can go back to the area view. As you see the location of the house against the neighborhood, even though this house is slightly elevated, the grade goes uphill. So the house is located in the lowest part of the neighborhood.
Yeah. yeah.
Right, yes. And I just looked, the woman that wrote us the letter,
I
it's
think
actually that house. Yeah, I thought it was the
Yeah.
one across the street, but it's,
Yeah,
she's actually down the street.
in that
so,
house, I checked the GIS, it does look like the house is like 6-7 feet higher than Tower.
All right, I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on the application? I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So I'll make a motion to approve the application. The requested variance is pre-existing. The applicant is not expanding the footprint of the house. The applicant is not exceeding the height limit in the neighborhood. The applicant is proposing essentially a second floor, which is consistent with the character of the neighborhood. There are numerous other houses similar to that, where this house is where the second floor is being added at this house is actually at a lower elevation than some of the other houses nearby. So given that the requested variance is pre-existing and is not substantial, I will make a motion to approve it.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you again.
Please take notice that the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Village of Sleepy Hollow will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, March 15, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the Municipal Building, 28 Beekman Avenue, Sleepy Hollow, New York, to receive comments from the public on the application submitted by Michael Every and Laura Bedrosian seeking approval to install 5-foot fencing in the required front yard where the following variance from Chapter 450 of the Code of the Village of Sleepy Hollow is required. Article 7, 450-40F2, supplementary regulations, coverage and open space, fences and walls, maximum permitted fence height, front yard 3 feet, proposed fence height 5 feet. The property involved in the application is located at 435 Bellwood Avenue, is situated in the R2 zoning district, and is shown on town tax assessment maps as section 115.7, block 1, lot 52. A copy of the application and accompanying documents are available for review at the Department of Architecture, Land Use Development, Buildings and Building Compliance during normal business hours, or may be reviewed and downloaded from the village's website. Written comments may also be sent in a manner ensuring receipt by 4 p.m. on the day of the public hearing by mail to Chairman Timothy Church, care of the Village of Sleepy Hollow, Department of Architecture, Land Use Development, Buildings and Building Compliance, 28 Beacon Avenue, Sleepy Hollow, New York, 10591, or by email to smccarthy@villageofsleepyhollow.org. All people are entitled to attend and be heard at this public hearing by order of the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Village of Sleepy Hollow. And in support of the application, we have the completed Zoning Board of Appeals application, which includes the denial letter from the building department, as well as we have photographs of the property where the fence is being proposed. We have the site survey, it appears. Yep. And we have some details on where the fence is proposed to be placed and pictures of the proposed fence. So I have all the returns from the neighbors been received. Thank you. Welcome. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all for hearing our case, and apologies in advance. I'm out of breath all the time, so walking the 20 or 5 feet from there is a lot. So yes, we own the corner property on 435 Bellwood, on the corner of Bellwood and DeVries. We're seeking a variance to allow for a white picket fence for part of our property, which I'm calling out just because we're not trying to fence in the entire property. We have an oddly shaped lot, as you can see, where it's a bit longer, so just trying to make really good use of the space in our property.
With Bellwood Avenue clearly marked.
Yes. the street view is, is available. At its highest point, the fence is 5 feet, but it's concave. It's not a solid fence. There is space in between. We tried to stay, within what we see existing on the road and in the neighborhood, just so, it's not anything that's intrusive to the neighborhood. It just fits within the look and feel. If you've been by our lot, you know that we have an oddly shaped yard with the property, and you can see it here hopefully clearly. We're really just looking to see how we can make the best use of our property. We have a growing family, as you can tell. I won't bring up the dogs that we have too, which could definitely jump a 3-foot fence. Yep, sorry. Sorry, I'm so out of breath. Thank you for noticing.
And
You
not
can
to,
sit down if you want to.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Please.
And
Yeah.
just want to be respectful of everyone's time. Obviously, we heard a very similar argument played before here. I think the key thing here, and I totally respect, the board's expectations around precedent and what that means for the neighbourhood. I think there's a couple of points to flag here, essentially. You can see from the map, again, this is a pretty odd-shaped lot. I don't know why our street, the house I think was built in the 30s, I don't know why this house in particular faces Bellwood Avenue. As you can see, the driveway is based on DeVries. Our neighbours face DeVries. Our neighbour who is next to us, where you see the fence location words, that property just above, their house actually faces Merle. And the reason why that's relevant is if you look at the red line of the fence here, the top part of the red line, they have an existing fence there, and that fence continues up where roughly the word red is. It continues that way along Bellwood. That is a large fence. By my estimation, it's about 5 feet high. And I expect that the reason, again, without knowing anything in particular, is probably because that fence faces, or rather that fence is part of the property which faces Merle. So I would expect that perhaps that's covered under something that is a side yard, a backyard, some other variation, some other different rule of the code. But the reason why I'm mentioning that in particular is our fence is going to connect with that fence, and it's going to be less than that height. So it's not going to be an island, so to speak. It's not going to be a fence suddenly when it's clear, open, nicely manicured lawns, and then a wall coming out of nowhere. It's going to connect and be less than that. If you look at the other parts of the property here, to the left where there's no red line, there's an existing fence line with our neighbour, which again, side yard, that's over 5 foot high fence. So what we've tried to accomplish here is to make the fence as minimal and unobtrusive as possible, given the location of the house on the plot. This to us seemed like the best way to do it. Again, looking at the front yard here, it's not really possible to set it back to 30 feet, given it will be up against where the house is effectively. And it's not mentioned on the survey too, but just to the topmost right corner of the house is a very large, more than our house is 3 stories, we've got a 3-story tree that's planted right there as well. So we don't really have the room to maneuver in a way that allows us to fence in our yard in a way that's meaningful. To bring up some of the other points that were raised here earlier, as you can see, the intersection, the corner of Bellwood and DeVries, we didn't put the fence anywhere near that. We don't want to obviously obstruct anyone's views coming out of that. Bellwood is obviously a busy street, so is DeVries as it leads down to DeVries Park. So we tried to get as far away from that as possible. So that is how we worked in that configuration. With the front of the house itself, and recognising the points raised about precedent and the neighbourhood and the character of the neighbourhood, I think a thing to keep in mind too is we have a large hedge that's existing. Sorry, this is just a location from a different angle. This is from the contractor. This is the backyard. So as you can see, there's not really a backyard that we can build in. I respect the code, and I think from my interpretation of what it's trying to preserve is, I think really trying to keep the character of the neighbourhood and the expectation that yards are kind of open, that people would use their backyard, they would fence their backyard inappropriately. But given the layout of the house here, it's not really a backyard, it's kind of more of an access corridor. If anything, it remains mostly in the shade given the trees and the way the house is oriented. But with the front yard itself, this is what it looks like for 10 months of the year. There's an existing hedge there. I think this was taken during the previous owner. We've since tidied it up a little bit, but it's a very large hedge. The fence itself is going to sit behind the hedge. It's not going to sit in front of the hedge. you'll have a very, very hard time, I think, trying to even notice that there is a fence there at all. This is from another angle, and you can see there, and apologies, it's not particularly clear in this photo, but you can see to the right of the photo, there's the existing fence line with the neighbour that is on the corner of Merlin and Bellwood. That fence there, you might be familiar with, you've probably driven past it, it's one of the main ways in the Phillips Manor area. As you can see, it's quite a large fence, it's almost in line with our hedge in that photo there. This is again from another angle. As you can see, the hedge line runs quite long. It's the length of the property. As I mentioned before, it's a very odd-shaped property we have. I think if our house was situated like our neighbours, the front of our house would face DeVries, and all of this yard would be considered backyard. And this is it again from a different angle here. So this is the corner of Bellwood, looking, I think, basically north-northwest, and then DeVries to your left as well. Here is what it looks like from behind the hedge. And see, this is the sort of the front yard we're talking about, and how difficult it is, I think, to build within a setback area based on what is in the code. I think that would give you a kind of impractical sliver of land that would basically fence in a garden bed. It would look ridiculous for one, and just wouldn't be practical at all. And this is a photo taken recently too. In full disclosure, we didn't want to suggest that we are just sending photos of what it looks like, you know, in full bloom of summer. This is what it looks like in winter. So no trickery going on here. You can see, yes, you can see a little bit through the hedge, but it is still pretty thick, and we think that it's not going to be an eyesore or distract the public. And two, the fence itself, it's a good quality fence, white picket. It is high. I respect precedent and having just gone through this in the previous point. It is a little high, but the reason for that is it's a concave fence, so it's going to dip down.
Do you know what the lowest point of the fence is?
I don't have that information offhand unless you know, but it's 5 foot the maximum at the post, and then it dips down as part of that. So it's not going to be a solid 5 foot. It's picketed. It's not going to look like, you know, a Berlin wall, just impenetrable whiteness. And that is, the rest of this here is materials effectively that were part of your packet here.
Did I miss it, or was there an image of the fence?
Yeah, there's,
I missed it, I'm sorry.
right
Didn't
here.
really-
This one.
I just haven't gotten it. Thank you.
How far back from the sidewalk effectively will the fence be installed? I know it's going to be behind the hedges,
So there would be the street, there would be the verge, there would be the sidewalk, then there is the garden bed where the hedge is located, and the fence would be on the other side of that. So I don't have that measurement with me. My ballpark thing is, I would say about 2-ish feet, a bit more than 2 feet. It's a fairly large hedge. And then that's, you know, where we're planning on placing it.
do you think you can accomplish your goals with a 4-foot fence?
It's tricky because, you know, and respectful of the discussion that you just had as well on the idea of precedent. I don't want it to look like suddenly you've given 4, now it's 5, which is the exact opposite of what you're trying to achieve with this. When we chose this fence, part of the reason for picking concave fence was we thought it was more in character with the neighbourhood. It was a more quaint looking fence, it was more delicate, and it's obviously a very nice area, that's why we picked it there. Having a 4 foot, I think we would need to change the fence. I think having a concave fence that's 4 foot would actually lower it down again, not enough to be within the 3 foot thing. We would still have to come to you for a variation, obviously. But, and I don't want to bring up the dog point, but that's kind of the issue we're getting into a little bit there, is it starts becoming quite low. So I think it would be tough. The other thing to mention, and I'm somewhat reluctant to mention this because this is ultimately our issue to deal with and it's not the board's issue. We've fully paid for the fence, unfortunately for us. Again, not your fault, our fault. And so I don't know in terms of changing that fence out what that is going to cost us in order to do that. So there would be a financial hit for us. Again, that's our problem, unfortunately. But as I mentioned before, the idea here was to pick a concave fence that would naturally dip, and it wasn't the intention, and it's not what we're doing. We're not trying to create suddenly a 5 foot high barrier. But even if we did, it would be in line with the fence that's going to connect to on our property line for our neighbour who is on Bellwood and Merlin.
So it's one of the difficulties the board has with the hedges. Obviously, the fence is going to be hidden by the hedges, so, who cares? Just go ahead and do the 5-foot fence. But we can't mandate that you keep those hedges. In fact, it's just, you may not be able to grow them. They may die, they may get a disease. And then, requiring you to go back with hedges that are above the fence is not feasible. And then, so what's left is a 5-foot fence. I completely understand the neighbor to the north of you has got essentially a 5-foot fence. So it would be in character with that portion of the street, but it's generally not in character with the neighborhood.
On that point, I would say to our neighbour to the right on the other side
Phillipsburg Manor.
yeah, you would see the picket fence they have running the whole way as well. So it's not just necessarily one side. We have neighbours with fence on both sides, so.
And theirs is at least 4 feet. It's
From-
definitely not 3 foot.
When you say both sides, so I know the fence to the north of you. What fence are you talking about?
So I forget the name of the, it's connected to Phillipsburg Manor.
It's that rental property that's on the corner of Bellwood and DeVries.
Oh, yeah, but
from
that-
Phillipsburg Manor.
But I don't think, I'm looking at that fence right now, that to me looks 3 feet.
Yeah, that's right, about a 3-foot fence, right? That's not going to be,
Yeah.
Any comments from the board?
And did you consider at all a fence more similar to what your neighbor's is, which is a little bit more like a, I don't know, like a garden lattice rather than fence? I'm just curious, and because it looks like you're looking at a white vinyl fence, and I appreciate you paid for it. I'm just kind of trying to.
Yeah, so and feel free to step in, but our thought process actually was that fence, we love our neighbours, don't get me wrong.
No, it's clearly been there a long time, and it is.
No, I just mean like,
Wood does.
from our perspective, I don't think that fence is necessarily the fence you would put in the front yard of the house, right? If you look at the fences that are on Bellwood, that are front yard fences, they are, generally speaking, white picket fences. I don't know the exact terminology, whether they're pointed, whether they're concave, whether they're convex. There are at least 3 or 4 that come to mind on Bellwood who have front yards facing Bellwood like ours that are white picket fences. And so their fence, again, neighbours are great, in my mind, is more appropriate for a back or side yard, which is what their yard
Which
is.
is what it
fence.
is, right?
So
To be fair.
for us, it was more about, this is what we would see when guests come to our house, this is what we would see when you walk in the front door, this is what we would see in photos or anyone who comes by.
And I'm sorry, I'm not making an aesthetic judgment on you at all. It's
No, no,
more
I-
about context and what's there already.
Yeah.
That's all, that's why I was asking.
We're not the designers, but the other piece of that too was, we've seen other fences in the entire Phillipsburg Manor, or the Phillips Manor neighborhood where they have that wood and it's not kept well, so that was a big piece of why we chose that material and that color, just because I think the upkeep makes more sense for the neighborhood, and we've seen some rotting fences. I don't want to call out any neighbors, but I want to avoid that.
It happens.
But yeah, for us here, this was what we thought was the best way to do it. And we've tried to be mindful of everything that we could here.
Thank you. I guess I'm struggling because the siting of your house actually is what makes it so difficult. Because technically the front is, what is that, on Bellwood, right? I mean, there's
Yes.
no interpreting that any other way. The front of your house is on Bellwood. And so the variance, I think, is significant to have a fence so close to the street at a front at that height. So it's not only right, because as of right, you can't even put a low fence all the way to the street. It has to be,
It has to be at least on the property line.
yeah.
I think it is, sorry, maybe this wasn't what you're saying, but I mean, it is on our property line, it is on the other side of the hedge. We're not building it right up to
Right,
the
it's
side.
it's the height of it. It's the height of it. At
Right.
that height, that's the challenge.
I would say though, again, just to reiterate the point, it is a concave fence. So you can see this is why we're here. At its highest point, it's a 5-foot high fence, but it does drop for the majority of the fence.
And there are plenty of other properties, which you already mentioned, that have a similar not as high as 5 feet, but I'm thinking of the house that's in what I really like, but where it's right against the sidewalk. So it is existing on Millwood.
If it's helpful, and I know this, we have no intention of taking down a hedge. I know people come and go and houses change. I would say fences don't last forever either, but we don't have any intention of taking down the hedge. For us, this is just about trying to strike that right balance between, not to bring up the dogs because that is a self-inflicted point, but we have a family on the way, we have a kid, we would like to fence our yard in so we feel a bit more secure, and we're just trying to strike that balance there.
If we're going to take the proposed fence by segments, I don't think I would have an issue with the southwest segment.
Plan southwest?
Right. Yeah.
So you mean to the left side of the driveway?
Right.
I would think that's further back from the set-off area, that's probably fine. Anyway.
Probably far enough, yeah.
It's just, it's really more the Bellwood facing side, I think, I'm not the expert.
I don't think anyone, well, you would need a variance for the north segment because it goes straight to Bellwood. You're not 30 feet.
There is an existing fence there.
No, I understand, but it's still within 30 feet of Bellwood.
Right.
So you can, the code is 3 feet.
I understand,
Yeah.
just, I'm trying to wrap my head around it a little bit, because I think for our neighbor.
No, we fully understand. And what I was just going to say is, yeah, we can, I think I could see the argument for the north segment, but probably the segments that are giving us heartburn are the ones along Bellwood and through the front yard.
Right. I mean, that top part, the fence location part that we're just talking about here, there's an existing fence that is there, right? That part we're building here is really more because that existing fence is starting to crumble and we just wanted to have a bit more privacy because of that lattice there. I'm not saying we want to take that part down, but I'm saying like if we took that part down, that wouldn't change anything necessarily about what we're trying to achieve on the front part, right? Because that fence is still there. What we're trying to do is just create that fenced-in area.
Yeah, I understand, and you know what, it's not unforeseeable that what could happen is, you know, the hedges go away, you were left with a fence at a house where people are driving into the manors, and the only fences they have seen so far are the one at Phillipsburg Manor, which is 3 to 4 feet, and this one would be, it would just stand out.
If you took this fence down, if we weren't here before you today, you would have that exact same problem with that existing fence that is there.
Yeah, but that existing fence is not before the zoning board today.
I know, I'm just saying.
No, we completely.
It's not our purview.
It's just not.
I know, I'm just saying that the point though is that
Precedence.
if the hedge wasn't
a lot
there,
there.
you would see a fence that would be on site. I'm just saying you would see one anyway.
I get it.
And yeah, I appreciate the point you're raising, I understand this, don't get me wrong, I'm just saying that like, this isn't the first this isn't the first fence that's being there, this argument, you would be in the exact same place if we didn't build a fence today, which we're not going to, but you understand. And if anything, that fence is starting to decay anyway, so I don't know exactly what happens when a fence like that falls down. I expect our neighbours might be here before you trying to rebuild the fence. Maybe it's the same argument, maybe it's not because it's already there and it's repaired, I don't know. But
Any other comments or?
No, I don't have any comments, thank you.
So I'll make a motion to open the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. Anyone from the public? I don't see anybody. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So, I just really struggle with the idea of a 5-foot fence essentially on the property line on Bellwood. I think the board, I can't speak for the board, but I think the board may support the north segment. Because you're correct, the house that is to the north of you faces Merlin. So basically, you're looking at that house's backyard, and that is typically a 5-foot fence for, most properties. And so it would make sense to do that. But board, when you look at Phillips Manor, when you look at Sleepy Hollow Manor, the general characteristics of these neighborhoods is open views, 3-foot front yard fences. We typically have, when we do grant variances for fences, it's typically not 2 feet above what the variance, the code allows. It's smaller than that, and there are a lot of extenuating circumstances. I just don't see enough extenuating circumstances for your application to allow the north-south segment and the segment that runs through the front yard, unless somebody disagrees. Okay, so I guess I'll make a motion, and this may help defray costs. I know you purchased the fence already, but I'll make a motion to partially approve and partially reject the variance. So to the extent the variance is required for the north segment, for the northwest segment, I would recommend that the board allow that due to the factors I just mentioned. But to the extent the variance is needed for the north-south segment bordering Bellwood and the segment that runs east-west through the front yard, so up to Bellwood, to the front of the house, I would make a recommendation to not allow that part of the variance. Short time.
So, would you feel more comfortable, and just throwing it out there, to approve a variance for 4 feet then?
Yeah, I would. And because I'll say this, I think that Phillipsburg Manor fence is above 3 feet, but it's not 4 feet.
Right.
And then I do understand that your neighbor's got the,
I'm just
fence.
concerned about the 5-foot to 3-foot drop versus the 5 to 4.
Sure.
Right, so.
Well, especially if it's a scalloped fence.
Yeah.
And that's where, we also, it would be helpful to see some compromise if we're gonna if we're being asked to approve a variance.
And maybe something in there talking about the hedges being maintained or something like that.
I struggle with that because the physical impossibility of maintaining them. I get
Okay.
the common.
Also the enforcement of that, it might be undue,
Right.
undue responsibility on the
Sure.
building department.
I'm just trying to make it.
Yeah, no, I know. We're trying to work with you.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, it's disappointing, but I understand where you're coming from, and I think you understand where we're coming from as well. Given, as you mentioned, I think it's fair to say that the fence on the Phillipsburg Manor side is more than 3 foot, maybe it's not 4 foot. That is divided by debris, then we hit our house, then the house over the corner. So 5 foot, say 3 foot-ish, then there's ours. Would we be able to put in for that section, the offending section that you mentioned, if we made that 4 foot? Again, it's going to be sitting behind a hedge, recognise that's not a permanent structure. It's still shorter than the existing fence line it's going to connect. I think too, as you go up that street, if you recall coming up Bellwood, that street does elevate as well, so it's not going to be like this, it's going to be a more gradual incline there. I mean, to be totally candid here, we're not developers, we're just homeowners. We bought this house, we just would like to be able to use our yard.
Yeah, I think the board would recommend that because essentially what you're asking for is the fence in the backyard. It's a corner lot, it's an awkward lot, so we're looking for a 4-foot fence for your backyard. We had no objection to the 5-foot north segment or the one that's to the west of the house. But if you want, we'll vote on a 4-foot fence.
I think that would be helpful if I understand the process, and please correct me if I'm not, because I would prefer to not have to do
Then
very
Yes.
you need to
Yes.
do that.
process again.
Thank you, Tom.
Then you wouldn't need to do that.
Just, I had to write out so many 17 handwritten,
Okay.
certified mail copies of the mail. It took me forever.
So let's vote on 5 foot north segment, 5 foot west segment, 4 feet east segment, and north-south segment along Bellwood.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, and good luck. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For 10 years.
Perhaps we can vote on the minutes the next step. The next hearing. So I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Recycle that over there.